I would like to present to you today about my research, a study on structural relationship among K-MOOC educational suitability, teaching presence, social presence, and learning outcome. I am Ju-kyoung Kim. It has been more than 10 years since the first MOOC, which allows anyone to use lectures at world-renowned universities and specialized educational institutions for free. Korea also established a Korean MOOC, K-MOOC, in 2015 and has provided various courses through the participation of various higher education institutions for the past 5 years. Initially, as a pilot project, there were only 10 participating universities, but as of October 2020, the number of participating institutions increased to more than 100, applicants to more than 1.1 million, and the number of courses provided to more than 700. Unlike other countries, K-MOOC has a government-led character and provides learners with educational experiences that were not found in existing education through the government's strong management system as part of online higher education. The K-MOOC, which is run by the government, has the advantage of increasingly reliability of the education completion and that the government strictly manages the quality of education. However, at the same time, there is also the problem of focusing more on the rigidity of curriculum, quantitative expansionary focus, than on enhancing the quality of the curriculum and government performance management efficiency rather than on the achievement of learners. These problems serve as a limitation for K-MOOC to satisfy the learner's educational suitability, and the unmet educational fit causes other learner to drop out of equation. The low completion rate problem is the same problem in MOOCs in other countries overseas. But the K-MOOC is operated on the national budget. So the issues with low completion rate is criticized as a waste of budget. Therefore, it is important for K-MOOC to support learners to achieve their learning goals by enhancing educational suitability through operating a curriculum that reflects the learning needs of various learners. In addition, the sense of isolation and loneliness the learners feel while experience K-MOOC acts as an impeding factor for learning motivation. So, it is important to increase the level of reality of the learner in the learning process so that they can have a meaningful impact on learning outcomes. Accounts of realism is recognition that learners perform learning activities with the instructor by supporting the design and organization of the entire learning process and facilitating learning. As through the instructor does not actually exist in online classes. In addition, the social presence is a factor that increases the learning effects by lowering negative psychology such as isolation or loneliness that are easily experienced in an online learning environment, and refers to learners' perception of how much they communicated and interacted with. In this study, teaching presence and the social presence are considered to be the main factors that increase learning outcomes, and the influence of two factors on learning outcomes is investigated. This study checked the educational suitability, teaching presence, and social presence that the learners perceived and experienced in a K-MOOC learning environment, which is different from offline university lectures and general learning environments that verifies the relationship among these factors by linking with learning outcomes. To the end, the relationship among educational suitability, teaching presence, social presence, and learning outcomes recognized by K-MOOC learners was structurally hypothesized and verified. The specific research questions are follows. First is, what is the structural relationship among K-MOOC, educational suitability, teaching presence, social presence, and learning outcome? Second is, how does K-MOOC's educational suitability affect learning outcome? Third is, how do K-MOOCs of teaching and social presence mediate the relationship between educational suitability and learning outcome? Second, theoretical background. 2.1 Educational suitability. Education suitability refers to the state in which the educational contents meet the educational goals or objectives. In general, educational suitability can be classified into social suitability and personal suitability of educational. Adult learners have strong motivation and spontaneity for learning and are generally higher in self-regulated skills than children and adolescents. However, since educational is not an immediate task for others, completion of K-MOOC courses is still low socially. The main goal of learning for K-MOOC learners is not the completion of the course, but personal suitability among educational suitability. In other words, K-MOOC learners can promote their own participation and continued learning if the course is useful to them, and the educational suitability for individual needs is high. Therefore, it is impossible to induce continuous participation of the learners and achieve learning goals by enhancing the educational suitability of K-MOOC in the direction of satisfying learners' intellectual curiosity and cultivating expertise and improving social relations. 2.2 Teaching presence. Reality means feeling that you exist somewhere. A sense of presence in teaching is one of the types of sense of existence. It has been studied in terms of the sense of presence, teaching presence, or sense of existence in classroom in an offline learning environment. It is a major influencing the learning process, and learners perceive a sense of reality differently in the learning process they experience. And this difference leads to a qualitative difference in the learning experience. K-MOOC has a big difference from traditional e-learning in terms of learning objectives and contents. But since the whole process of learning takes place online, K-MOOC's sense of teaching reality, teaching presence, formed through clear learning design and appropriate learning promotion, significantly impacts on learning outcome. In K-MOOC learning, teaching presence is very important factor in achieving the learning outcomes set by each learner. In previous studies, it was also confirmed that the sense of teaching presence has a positive effect on learning outcome. So, in this study, in order to confirm the significant effects of the sense of presence, teaching presence to enhance the learning outcomes of K-MOOC, the detailed components of the teaching presence in the study of Swans et al. 2008. 2.3 Social presence. The sense of social presence was firstly introduced as the concept of a specific perception of others in interpersonal relationship with others by Short, Williams and Christie, 1976. K-MOOC has the advantage of being able to voluntarily participating in lectures that the learners want at the desired time beyond the constraint of time and space. However, communication required on learning is limited by the physical distance that exists between instructors and learners and among learners. And this often leads learners to experience isolation and loneliness. In online learning, it was reported that social presence solves the problem of learners' loneliness and learning identity and has a positive effect on learning outcome. K-MOOC differ from general e-learning in that it is an online higher education, and the fact that educational is almost free includes both strong motivation for learning and dropout of learner. From this point of view, the social presence in K-MOOC is considered to act as a significant positive factor for learning outcomes, in that communication with learners in similar environments is possible. This study assumes that this is a close relationship between educational suitability and social presence experienced and recognized by K-MOOC learners. So, uh, assume that there is a close relationship between educational suitability and social presence experience as recognized by K-MOOC learner. Based on this assumption, how educational suitability experienced and perceived by K-MOOC learner affects social presence, and how the social presence affects learning outcomes, and how the sense of social presence mediate the relationship between educational suitability and learning outcome. Third, research method. 3.1 Research target. The purpose of this study was to find out how learners perceived an educational suitability, pedagogical presence is teaching presence, and social presence during the K-MOOC classroom on learning outcome. To the end, educational suitability, teaching presence, and social presence and learning outcomes were measured for learners who have taken K-MOOC more than once. 3.2 Research Tools is for first is educational suitability. For the suitability of education, the tool of using LIM 2013 and 성현 O and 성현 Kim 2006 were modified and supplemented to suit the purpose of this study. The questionnaire was consist of 7 questions, and it was measured on Likert 5-point scale, and Kronberg alpha is 0.885. Second is teaching presence. In terms of teaching presence, the tool of Nayeon Kim 2011 were modified and supplemented to suit this purpose of this study. The questionnaire was consist of 7 questions, and it was measured on the Likert 5-point scale, and Kronberg alpha is 0.831. Third is social presence. In terms of social presence, the tools of Jong-hoon Lim 2012 were modified and supplemented to suit the purpose of this study. The questionnaire was consist of 7 questions. It was measured on the Likert 5-point scale, and Kronberg alpha is 0.941. And first is learning outcomes. In terms of learning outcomes, the tools of Kyung Choi 2008 and Suyoung Fox 2010 were modified and supplemented to suit the purpose of this study. The questionnaire was consist of 7 questions, and it was measured on a Likert 5-point scale, and Kronberg alpha is 0.892. 3.3 is analysis procedure. The correct data of this study were analyzed with SPSS and AMOS. First is research result. 4.1 Descriptive statistics and correlation analysis. The mean, standard deviation, skewness, and kurtosis were checked to see if the survey data follows the assumption of normal distribution. The mean of each variable ranged from a minimum of 3.16 to a maximum of 3.93. It was confirmed that the skewness was in the range of minus 0.3552 to minus 0.872, and the kurtosis was in the range of minus 0.564 to 1.941. If the absolute value of skewness is greater than 3, or the absolute value of kurtosis exceeds 10, it judged a serious problem in the collected data. The analysis result indicate the variable in this study satisfy the basic assumption of normal distribution. 4.2 Verification of the measurement model. CFA was conducted to determine the significance and reliability of the research model measurement variables. Looking at the analysis results based on its fitness criterion, chi-square is 1140.965. Degree of freedom is 399. And all sure acceptable results. Therefore, it was confirmed that this research model is a model that can be analyzed. 4.3 is verification of a structural model. As all the components and criteria of the measurement model was satisfied, the degree of conformance of the research model was measured. And look at the result analyzed based on its goodness of fit criterion. Its model's goodness of fit was analyzed as CFI is 0.895, chair I is 0.886, NFI is 0.851, and RMSEA is 0.074. As a result of analyzing the influence of educational suitability on learning outcomes, teaching presence and social presence learning outcomes are standardized beta is 0.418 and teaching presence is standardized beta is 0.823. Social presence is standardized beta is 0.647. Next, look at the results of verifying the influence of the sense of teaching presence and social presence on learning outcomes. The teaching presence is standardized beta is 0.336 and the social presence is standard beta is 0.171. As a result of analysis, it was found that K-MOOC educational suitability had a statistically significant effect on learning outcome. All direct and indirect effects were analyzed to be statistically significant. Accordingly, the total effect of educational suitability on learning outcome is standardized beta is 0.806, which mediates the direct effect of educational suitability on learning outcomes and the teaching presence. As a result, the direct effect of educational suitability on learning outcomes standardized beta is 0.277 and the indirect effect of educational suitability on learning outcome through social present standardized beta is 0.111 are all included. It was the sum of the values. Fifth, conclusion. This study examines the structural relationship among K-MOOCs, educational suitability, teaching presence, social presence, and learning outcomes, and examines the effects of educational suitability on learning outcomes and the mediating effect of teaching and social presence in the relationship between two variables. Accordingly, this study compounds the importance of the appropriateness of education required in the K-MOOC learning environment, and at the same time confirmed that a sense of teaching presence and social presence are significant factors that enhance learning outcomes. Based on the analysis results, the conclusion of this study were as follows. First, it was found that educational suitability had a significant impact on learning outcome in K-MOOC. In this case of an adult learner, it is highly likely that they will learn based on their voluntary motivation and desire for learning. And this study compound that the suitability of education of K-MOOC to the educational objectives and goals set by the person acts as a major factor in determining learning maintenance. In this context, the high educational suitability of K-MOOC course prevents learners from drop out and improves learning outcome by continuing learning. Second, the sense of realism is teaching significantly mediate the relationship between educational suitability and learning outcome. Therefore, in order to enhance the sense of teaching presence, K-MOOC should establish a basis for reflecting the needs of learners throughout education by reinforcing the teaching activity support system and expanding the learner-teacher communication channel. Third, the sense of social presence significantly mediate the relationship between educational suitability and learning outcome. K-MOOC learners are generally adult learners, and their main motivation for learning is to satisfy intellectual curiosity and cultivate expertise in personal interest. Therefore, in order to increase the learning outcomes of K-MOOC, it is a way to activate interaction in the learning process and to share and spread information and knowledge on the field of interest for adult learners who are difficult to immerse to long-term learning. Currently, K-MOOC is limited in such an environment, and adult learners are very limited in experiencing a sense of social presence. In the future, K-MOOC environment various measures to increase the sense of social presence should be sought. Thank you for your listening.